Hi everyone, welcome back. In this lecture, we'll create a Spring Boot REST API that returns Java Bean as a JSON to the client. Well, let's go to IntelliJ IDEA. In previous lecture, we have created a simple Spring Boot Hello World REST API, and this REST API returns a Hello World string to the client. Well, in real-time projects, we create the REST APIs that returns a JSON to the client, right? So in this lecture, we will see how to create a simple Spring Boot REST API that returns a Java Bean as a JSON to the client. Well, it's pretty simple. Just follow the steps that I'm going to implement in this lecture. So first step is we need to create a Java Bean. So go to main package and let's quickly create a new package and let's call it as Bean. And within a Bean package, let's create a Java class. Let's call it as student. And let's go and let's define instance variables for this student class. So let's have a private string student first name and then private string student last name, and also let's add a id to this student class. So let's say private int id. So this is a student id, this is a first name, this is a last name. Alright, perfect. Next, let's go ahead and let's create a parameterized constructor for this student class. Well, in order to create a constructor, right click on this class, generate, and then constructor, and select all the fields and then click on OK. Now we have created a parameterized constructor for this student class. Next, let's go ahead and let's also create a getter setter methods for these instance variables. So in order to create a getter setter methods, right click on the class, generate, and choose getter and setter and select all the fields and click on OK. Now we have created getter setter methods for these instance variables. Alright, perfect. Now we have created student as a Java Bean, and whenever we develop the REST API, we use this student Java Bean as a response, and then Spring MVC will convert this Java Bean, Java object into a JSON, and it will send that JSON back to the client. So this is the first step, that is we have created a student Java Bean. Second step is we need to create a Spring MVC controller. We'll go to controller package, right click on it, new, and then choose Java class, and let's give controller name as student controller. And let's go and let's annotate this class with @REST_controller annotation to make this class as a Spring MVC REST controller. This is the second step, that is we have created student controller class. Third step is we need to create the Spring Boot REST API that returns Java Bean as a JSON to the client. Well, creating REST API using Spring Boot is very simple. We just have to create a Java method, and we need to annotate that Java method with the Spring annotations. Alright, so here within a student controller, let's create a Java method first. Let's type public, and let's give return type of the method as student, and let's give method name as get student, and then let's create a student object over here, student equal to new student, and let's pass a value to the constructor, id as a 1, and then name as first name as let's say Ramesh, and then last name let's say Padhare. Perfect. Now we have created student object. Next, let's return this student object. Perfect. Now we have created a simple Java method. It returns a student object. Next, let's go ahead and let's make this Java method as a REST API using Spring annotation. Well, this method is going to be handle HTTP GET request. Hence, we are going to use @GET mapping annotation over here. We use @GET mapping annotation to map incoming HTTP GET request with this method. Next, let's go and let's configure the URL for this REST API. So here we just need to pass the URL. For example, let's say student. Well, whenever client want to call this REST API, then client have to use this URL. For example, HTTP localhost :8080 followed by the URI, that is student. Alright, so whenever client want to call this REST API, then client have to use this URL. Next, let's go ahead and let's run the Spring Boot application and let us test this REST API. So let me start the Spring Boot application. Well, notice here our Spring Boot application is up and running in embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Well, let me copy this URL to access this REST API, and we can use a browser to make HTTP GET request. So in a new tab, just paste this URL and hit enter, and there we go. the client got a response in a JSON format. Alright, so this is how we develop the Spring Boot REST API that returns Java Bean as a JSON to the client. Alright, perfect. Now let me recap what we have done in this lecture. First, we have created student Java Bean. Next, we have created student controller, and within a student controller we have created a REST API that returns a student object as a JSON to the client. Alright, it's pretty simple, isn't it? In next lecture, we will see how to create a Spring Boot REST API that returns list as a JSON to the client. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture.